You know, either a canon works or it does not work. Either it fulfills the particular thou shalt and thou shalt nots of the canon form, or it doesn't do that. And in the same way, the fugue is a process which is about process, really. It concentrates on process. And one is not likely in a fugue to be seduced by the momentary attraction or distraction of a particular idea. I mean, you can say to me, I think that the ninth fugue from the Art of Fugue is a rather intrusive and virtuosic subject. And if you did say that, I really wouldn't disagree with you, to tell you the truth. But I would say to you, well, no matter, it works. It works as a subject in its own exposition, and it works as a counter theme. It mates perfectly well with the main theme of the Art of Fugue. So, in a way that we will never be able to find agreement about the second theme of Beethoven's Emperor Concerto, we could say, well, okay, it's a theme of no distinction whatsoever, but it does have an ongoing relationship with the totality of this particular structure, with the totality of the Art of Fugue.
Do you share the general view that this is the culmination of all Bach's fugue writing?
Yes, I do, but not specifically because of its scope and scale and technical wizardry and all that sort of thing. Not just because one theme generates 15 fugues and 4 canons, amazing as that is. There are moments in the Art of Fugue that are much more valuable than its virtuosity, I think. Moments that, for me, absolutely surpass everything else that Bach wrote. I really can't think of any music that moves me more deeply than that last fugue, you know.
The unfinished
The
one.
unfinished fugue, and not just because of all the emotional associations that we inevitably bring to it, not just because we know that he died, leaving it incomplete, leaving it literally in the middle of the bar, already enormously long as it was. It really is because that final fugue has a sense of peace, a devotional quality that I think even for Bach is really overwhelming. The interesting thing about that final fugue, and to some extent about all of the Art of Fugue, is that in it he literally turns his back on every tendency abroad in the musical world of his time.
Well, by the time he wrote it, fugues were very unpopular.
Oh, well, hugely unpopular, and fugal adventures of this size and tenacity were simply unheard of. They had no place at all in the 18th century scheme of things. Fugues were out and minuets were in, I guess. But more than that, Bach actually, I think, quite deliberately changes his harmonic style in this work. There is nothing in the Art of Fugue remotely like the clear-cut modulations of that B-flat minor fugue, for example, or the E major fugue that we talked about a few moments ago, or almost any of the earlier fugues, really. Instead, he reaches back at least 100 years and borrows a type of counterpoint and a concept of key association from the North German and the Flemish composers of the early Baroque, this kind of texture. It allows him to write tonally, but without any of the technicolor trappings of tonality. For me, these pieces contain an endless range of gray tints. I mean that as a compliment, because I love gray. Schweitzer, as a matter of fact, had some marvelous things to say. He said it was a still and serious world, deserted and rigid, and without color, and without light, and without motion, and so on. He was talking about the first fugue, I think, specifically, but that pretty well sums up my feeling about the last one, too, I must say. But the other side of the coin is that Bach introduces into the Art of Fugue a degree of chromaticism that in many respects reaches out, I think, at least until the time of Wagner, at least for 100 years beyond his own time. There's nothing remotely like it in between, really. And it's very similar to Wagnerian and post-Wagnerian chromaticism in that it constantly reaches farther and farther and farther. It never modulates in the conventional sense. It never comes to rest in any one key, you know, but it leaves this extraordinary impression of an infinitely expanding universe. There are moments like this which could almost have been written by early Schoenberg, you know.
But of course, in this last fugue, he also develops 3 separate subjects, the last of which is the one on his own name.
That's right, and there could not be a more striking, more amazing contrast between the way he uses those 4 notes here and the way he used them at the beginning of the fugue that I played at the top of the program. I mean, here, all of the extroversion, all of the superfluous excitement is gone, you know. He's literally signing his name to what he obviously knew would be the work that summed up his life. And since that life was one in which he moved farther and farther outside of the orbit of expectations that the world thrust upon him, in all of his work, even in those moments of great vigor and great energy and so on, he manages to tell